Um, what I thought about when I thought about my contribution to this meeting was, first of all, making sure that I didn't cover the sort of ground that everybody else was going to cover. But the second thing was to think very deeply about the question itself, about what it means for Britain. And when I started to think about that, I started to think, well, not everybody in Britain is the same, because there's a load of us who have roots in the global south that live in the global north. So we're sitting here, as I am now, in the belly of the beast, and I have a very different experience to a lot of my comrades in the movement up here. And I think that has to be taken into account and drawn on when we're thinking about what this actually means for Britain. So when I was on the march with somewhere between 800,000 and 1 million people, historic march on Saturday through London, one of the things that struck me the most about that was that in this country, anyway, in Britain, I have never been on a march with so many people who look more like me. Never, it's never happened. So even when I've been on a kind of the annual anti-racist march, and there's been lots of black people on there, there's actually been loads of white people as well. But overwhelmingly on Saturday, what we saw was a massive mobilization that I haven't seen before. So where does that come from? It comes from the sort of things that we've just been hearing about, that mobilization, that awakening, really, of awareness, that awakening of an anger, for sure, but also what June Jordan years ago used to call that rage. He talked about a place of rage. And I think that's what we saw in London. We're seeing it in lots of places across the global north, where people who wouldn't necessarily come out and demonstrate or be part of a kind of political movement were on those marches on Saturday. Now, we can either say, well, that's a kind of one-off thing, and that's just the circumstances of what's the destruction of Gaza and the genocide that we're seeing against the Palestinian people there. Or we can also start to think that there's something here that we can look to build in terms of organizing people to be part of something bigger, because eventually, at the cost of thousands of deaths that we've already seen and likely more to come, because people won't stop it, and the so-called world leaders are refusing to stop this genocide from taking place, eventually it will stop. And what I think would be a real sadness, really, in many ways, is we've not started to think about how we build the movement that's going to emerge from this as well. I also, I don't like being shaped by events. I like to be somebody who tries to shape events. And I think that's not always possible. But I think as organizers, as socialists, as people who want to build that different world, I think we have to think about how we can use the mobilization that we're currently seeing to build for something bigger and better. So when we're thinking about what the rise of the global south should mean for Britain, I think one of the things that it does is that it is an opportunity for us to make a real difference in Britain as well. Because frankly, if the global south rises, and it makes no difference to the fact that as a black person I can't get a job, or that I'm still being shit on basically by people who are harassing me in the street, by the police or by any employer, or by these racists that seem to have got emboldened, certainly in Britain on Saturday, who used this whole new thing that emerged that I'd never heard of before. Apparently we have an armistice weekend, which I've never heard of before, and we have an armistice Sunday that I knew about, but never an armistice weekend. But it's created specifically to try and stop people from mobilizing, but people mobilized anyway. And it's that point, that anger, that we really have to turn into more than anger, but turn into a rage that's positive, that's creative, that turns into something that brings about fundamental difference. Yes, in terms of how we can stand up for the genocide that's against the genocide that's taking place in Gaza, but also how we can use that to stand up against the genocide that's taking place in the Democratic Republic of Congo, in the murders that are taking place in Haiti, in the destruction of Syria that's still taking place across the world. And I think this is a real moment for us to ask ourselves the question, what are we going to do? How are we going to build that movement that's going to bring about a fundamental shift in the world in favor of working class and peasant communities across the country? So those are my thoughts. That I think this is a real, genuine moment in history where we have to stand with the Palestinians, but we also have to stand with all of these other folks who are getting exploited, but also who are being attacked across the globe. I did a piece for the Morning Star for tomorrow's paper that made the point. There are at least 32 conflicts taking place, major conflicts, where people across the world are getting slaughtered, and it's mostly in the global south. And these are being promoted by nations in the global north, notably the United States and their own settler colonial regime that they have over there. So I think we have to build the movement. For me, it's always about organizing. It's always about not letting people shape events for us, but as working class, as peasant communities across the world, as taking the initiative to build our own movement that responds to the demands that we want to see taking place. Those are my thoughts. Thanks very much for listening. Good luck to you all.